Imagine a girl from the stars, her skin shimmering like moonlight, her lips forever sealed by an ancient curse. No one had ever heard her laugh or cry or sing, until a single human melody drifted across her lonely world. In that moment, her heart remembered how to feel, and her soul finally learned to speak. This isn't just a story about music, it's about connection, about humanity reaching across galaxies to heal what no technology could. Stay with me, because you're about to witness a miracle in song. She stood at the edge of the garden, hands folded tightly against her chest, eyes like pools of quiet moonlight staring into the darkness beyond the glass. No one knew her real name, not anymore. They only called her the Silent One. On her world, voices were more than sound, they were considered life energy itself. When her people found her cursed, unable to speak or even make the smallest noise, they shunned her. Not out of hatred but of fear that her silence might spread, might swallow their songs and stories. The Silent One had learned to move like a ghost, drifting from room to room in the great halls of her people, painting her thoughts with her fingers in the air or drawing symbols in the dirt. Even then, no one stayed long to watch her hands dance. She had been born in the upper tiers of the sky temples, where every child's first song was celebrated with moonflowers and luminous lanterns. But when she opened her tiny mouth and no notes came, her mother wept. Her father turned away. She became a phantom among the living, her hair growing long and silver blue, her skin pale as starlight. She watched her people sing to the moons every dusk, watched them weave together elaborate harmonies that made their cities shimmer with color. She watched, and inside, her spirit trembled against the walls of her own silence, like a bird clawing at a cage. It was in this condition, half alive, half drifting, that she first saw the human ship arrive. The elders gathered to watch the descent. The humans were strange, considered both fascinating and terrifying in the old texts. They were loud, unpredictable. Rumor claimed they had destroyed their own planet and built 1,000 new songs out of the ruins. The Silent One hid behind a flowering pillar, breath caught in her chest. She'd never seen a creature so solid, so direct in their movements. The human who stepped forward had a shock of dark hair and eyes that sparkled with warmth she had never known. He knelt as he introduced himself, Micah. Her people responded with a ceremonial hum, the greeting reserved for visitors from the stars. But Micah did not hum back. Instead, he pressed a hand to his chest, tilted his head, and began to sing. It wasn't like the careful, layered harmonies of her people. It was raw, simple, and utterly human. A low, soft tune that rose and fell, filled with broken edges and sudden warmth. His voice quivered like a flame in the wind. Every elder flinched at first. The sound felt jagged, almost dangerous, to their delicate hearing. But the Silent One, she pressed forward, her fingers curling around the pillar so hard her knuckles paled. For the first time in her life, she felt a tug inside her ribcage, as though the music had reached past the curse and brushed her soul. Her lips parted instinctively. Nothing came out, but she felt something move inside her, a trembling echo that she had long thought dead. Micah noticed her immediately. His eyes softened even more, and he sang louder, moving closer, each step cautious yet deliberate. The elders gasped and tried to stop him, but he simply raised a hand, shaking his head gently. When he finally stood before her, she wanted to look away, her fingers flew up to hide her mouth, her head bowed. But Micah simply reached out and took her hand, pressing it against his own throat as he continued to sing. She felt the vibrations through her fingertips, the gentle thunder of human breath and the warmth of living sound. A spark flickered in her. Her breath hitched. Micah finished his song and lowered his head to meet her gaze. No judgment. No fear. Only kindness, the kind that felt both alien and deeply necessary. She trembled, her eyes wide and wet. The elders quickly approached, wrapping her in protective cloth and pulling her away from him. They scolded Micah in their melodic tongue, explaining the curse, explaining that she was dangerous, unfit to hear or echo their songs. But Micah only watched her, sorrow shining in his eyes. Later that night, when the moonlight washed the city in pale blue, the Silent One slipped from her room and crept toward the gardens. She knew she wasn't supposed to see him again. But something inside her had cracked, a dam she hadn't realized existed until it started to break. Micah was sitting by a fountain, his guitar-like instrument in his lap. When he saw her, his face lit up with surprise, then immediate understanding. He lifted the instrument and began to play again. Soft chords that shimmered like ripples across the still water. The Silent One moved closer, step by trembling step, until she was close enough to see his hands move across the strings. She sat, knees tucked under her chin, eyes locked on his face. Micah sang a new song then, something slower, sadder. A lullaby, perhaps. Or a prayer. She felt her heart rise with each note, felt her fingers twitch as if trying to shape the sound into something real. He reached for her hand again, guided it back to his throat. This time, she did not resist. The vibrations crawled up her arm, blooming under her skin like morning light. Her chest heaved, her mouth trembled. And then, in the smallest, most fragile exhalation, a sound. A single breathy note slipped from her lips. It was barely there, more like a whisper than a true voice. But it was enough. Micah's eyes filled with tears. He stopped playing, just staring at her as if he had seen the universe reborn. The Silent One clapped her hands over her mouth, eyes wide in disbelief. Then she laughed, though no sound came. But even that silent laughter felt electric, as if her whole being was now sparking awake. Micah laughed too, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. He began to play again, more eagerly, encouraging her to try again. And she did. Another soft, airy note. Then another. The curse didn't shatter all at once. It peeled away like old skin, revealing warmth underneath. When the dawn came, she and Micah sat side by side on the fountain's edge, her head resting against his shoulder. Her fingers traced patterns on his arm, notes she hadn't been able to sing but could now almost imagine in her throat. The elders found them like that, horrified at first. They tried to drag her away, but she held on to Micah's sleeve, shaking her head violently, tears pouring down her cheeks. In a final act of defiance, she opened her mouth and let out another fragile note, louder this time, a tiny echo of his human song. The entire courtyard went silent. For the first time, they saw her not as a cursed vessel but as a being trying desperately to live. Micah stood and faced them, his instrument slung across his back, one hand still holding hers. He spoke softly, in their tongue he had begun to learn. She is not broken. She is becoming. The elders hesitated. Their people valued music above all, and to hear even a sliver of sound from her felt like a miracle. Whispers rose among them, disbelief, fear, wonder. Micah led her back to the center of the courtyard. There he started to play once more, his voice weaving around her faint, broken notes. Each attempt was fragile, but each was stronger than the last. The entire city slowly gathered around, drawn by curiosity or perhaps something deeper, the call of life itself. They watched as she learned to shape each breath, each trembling sound, matching his melody piece by piece. Children gasped, elders wiped tears from their cheeks. And as the sun rose fully, painting the city towers in gold and silver, the Silent One finally sang a clear note, true, pure, trembling with a century of grief and longing. Micah turned to her, eyes bright. He bowed low, and she mimicked him, her eyes shining. In that moment, she felt a weight lift from her spirit, 1,000 unspoken words finally blooming into light. For the first time in her life, she felt whole. And in that courtyard, surrounded by her people and the human who had taught her to hear her own soul, she knew she had finally begun her true song. The dawn after her first true note lingered in her memory like a dream, a shimmering veil of light and warmth. But as the days passed, she learned that healing a single voice did not heal an entire culture overnight. After the courtyard miracle, some elders argued that she had tricked them, that the human's influence was a kind of black magic or sonic infection. Others believed she was a sign from the stars, proof that life could change and still remain sacred. The Silent One, though she had now begun to hum small, gentle melodies, felt the weight of these arguments swirl around her like a winter storm. Micah remained by her side through it all. Each morning, he coaxed her into breathing exercises, careful scales, even small games where she tried to echo the shortest human words. She failed more often than she succeeded, but each success was a bloom of light inside her chest. He taught her that sound was not just performance but connection, a bridge between two souls. Even when she stumbled, Micah never looked disappointed. Instead, he squeezed her hand, offered a grin, and simply said, "Try again." For the first time, her people began to watch her closely rather than avoid her. Children left small flowers at her feet. Some older citizens began to practice her tentative new sounds in secret, as if rehearsing for a festival they had not yet announced. Then, one evening, a great council was called beneath the moonlit spires. The elders' voices rose in melodic debate, each tone sharp as lightning, each note weighted with centuries of tradition. Micah stood beside her on the dais, fingers wrapped firmly around hers. She trembled, not from fear of them but from fear of losing this tiny beginning she had discovered. Finally, the High Elder turned his gaze on her, a man whose hair was woven with starlight threads and whose voice could split stone. He gestured at Micah with a single long finger. "Outworlder," he intoned in deep chords, "why have you defiled our sacred balance? Her silence was her place among us, her destiny. You force her to abandon the moon's design." Micah took a step forward. He swallowed once, then began to speak, slowly, carefully, each syllable touched with their language but shaped by his human accent. "She was never meant to be empty," he said. "You saw her silence as final, But I heard something waiting.
I saw someone, not something broken.
I came to study your songs, not to steal them, but she called to me without a word. The silent one felt her breath hitch, her fingers tightening around his. He paused, glanced down at her, and she saw that his eyes were shimmering with emotion he couldn't fully express. I don't want to change your culture, he continued, voice quivering slightly. But she deserves her own melody. She is more than a vessel for silence. She is a miracle waiting to be sung.
A hush fell.
The entire hall felt suspended, each person holding breath like glass about to shatter. Then, to everyone's shock, the silent one stepped forward. Her legs felt like trembling reeds, her lungs raw from so much effort. Micah looked ready to stop her, but she shook her head once, a small but solid gesture. She turned to face her people. In that moment, her silence wasn't shameful, it was a horizon, waiting for sunrise. She pressed a hand to her chest, breathed deep, and let out a soft, trembling sound. It was not strong, a faint chord, barely enough to ripple across the room. But it carried her entire spirit, all her grief, all her longing, all her desperate hope. Then, for the first time ever, she spoke a word.
Home.
It was the simplest human word Micah had taught her, one she had practiced alone at night, mouthing it into her palms, tasting its shape. The hall gasped, some stumbling backward, others falling to their knees. She repeated it, a little louder.
Home.
Micah's eyes filled with tears. He stepped forward, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder as though steadying a fragile sculpture. And in that hall of ancient voices, her small human word blossomed into a revelation. A young singer, her cousin, stepped forward, tears streaming down his cheeks. He sang a short verse in response, a blessing for newborn voices. The silent one swayed as if her knees might buckle, but Micah steadied her again. Then another elder stepped forward, and another. They began to weave their own harmonic lines around her tiny broken note, not mocking it, but lifting it, cradling it, honoring it. Hours passed, and by the end, every pillar of the great hall echoed with a new sound, the fusion of her fragile human word with their ancestral melodies. The silent one collapsed against Micah, sobbing silent tears. He held her, rocking her gently, humming into her hair. In the days that followed, the city transformed. At first, only the youngest dared to echo the new hybrid sound. But slowly, even the older generation realized that they had not lost something precious, they had gained a new depth.
A new future.
For the silent one, each day became a small victory. She learned to say Micah's name, at first as a breath, then as a true word. Me, Cah, she would whisper at sunrise, pressing her lips against his hand as he smiled like the dawn itself. Micah stayed, not as an outsider but as a student and a guide. He taught them that sometimes sound could heal beyond just ears, that it could mend hearts and bridge worlds. They built a small home at the edge of the city gardens, surrounded by moonflowers and climbing silversong vines. In the mornings, she would sit beside the fountain where she had first found her voice, practicing new sounds with Micah's guitar notes drifting around her like starlight. Soon, others began visiting to learn. Children mimicked her attempts, giggling when they failed but always returning. Young musicians offered to teach her new melodies, and in return, she showed them human words she had learned from Micah. She was no longer the silent one. Her people began calling her Araya, a word meaning dawn singer in their language. On the first festival of light after her transformation, she stood at the central plaza beside Micah. Instead of the elaborate multi-part harmonies that always began the festival, she stepped forward alone. The entire city waited, breathless. She closed her eyes and sang. Her voice was not perfect. It cracked and quivered, thin at the edges, sometimes slipping into a whisper. But each note was alive, carrying her entire spirit into the night sky. Micah joined her halfway through, weaving his soft human chords around her song. Then the people joined, and together they created a tapestry of sound that pulsed like a living heartbeat across the city. At the peak of the song, Araya opened her eyes and looked at Micah. He was already looking at her, his expression shining with so much warmth she thought she might melt. When the final notes faded, a hush fell. Then a single child clapped, a sound sharp as a lightning strike in that silence.
Then another.
Then all at once, the entire city erupted in joyous applause, the sound rolling over the plaza like a tidal wave of light. Araya turned and pressed her forehead to Micah's, tears slipping down her cheeks. In a hoarse whisper she said, "Home you." He laughed, sobbed, and hugged her so tightly she thought her bones might break, but she held on just as fiercely. Years later, the songs they created together would become a new tradition, the festival of joining, where human instruments and alien voices mingled under the moonlight. Children would grow up learning both the ancient harmonies and the simple, powerful words of Earth. But for Araya, None of that history mattered as much as the simple truth she had discovered in Micah's arms. She had a voice, and it had been waiting not to be found by her people, but to be unlocked by love. She had spent a lifetime trapped behind silence, dreaming of songs she thought she'd never know. And now, every sunrise was a hymn, every breeze a melody, every heartbeat a quiet promise that she was more than enough. All because one human had dared to hear her, and to teach her to hear herself. In the end, Araya never returned fully to the old ways. She kept her new name, her new sounds, and her new life by Micah's side. Together, they wove songs that no star or planet had ever heard before. And in every note, she carried that single sacred word, home.